I want you to be, when you finish the book, I want you to be sad that you're finished reading it, but happy because it feels like a story beginning for the protagonist, for the character. I really try to put hope at the end of the book, and positivity. It's a dark noir, but life is a dark noir sometimes, and you still need, and to tie it back into how to exist in a career with constant rejection, you need hope. To see through kind of like the darkness of the story and see that it's also about a story beginning, which is really what our 20s were about. It's our story's beginning, and that's what I'm doing with the book.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, an author podcast. We get to talk to amazing and creative people, writing books, but also beyond writing books, like doing a lot out in the space. And today's no exception. Really excited to have my guest on the show today. I check out like IMDb. I see this person. I see him everywhere. And the fact that he's writing a book and sharing it with us and his journey today is a real joy. So I'm really, really excited to have him on the show. I'm looking at the website and I'm checking it out. Alex R. Johnson is our guest. And the website, brooklynmotto.com. There it is. Yeah, and it's got great reviews. Oh my gosh. Like just pages and pages of reviews for this author and his book. Alex, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Excellent. We chatted before we hit record. Let everybody know, Alex, where you are in this big world of ours.
I am in Brooklyn, New York. Moved back to Brooklyn after 10 years away in Austin, and before that, Brooklyn. So yeah.
So you went from a place with a big sky to a place full of big skyscrapers.
Mm-hmm. I do, and I do miss the big sky. Whenever I go back to Austin, it's big. It's very big. Beautiful.
There you go. Good. Excellent. Probably see the world from two different perspectives then, right? It's a totally different world in Texas compared to New York, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Austin's turning into a kind of a, bigger city. It isn't turning into a bigger city. It is a big city now at this point. I mean, with the tech companies, it's a very different vibe from when we moved there 13 years ago. But yeah, I mean, I think they're both just very distinctive places, and I love living in a distinctive place in terms of feeding my creative side.
Yeah. What brought you back to Brooklyn from Texas?
During COVID, we had always kind of thought. I also write screenplays, and we'd also thought about eventually going to Los Angeles and just kind of focusing on that. But during COVID, it just really became like absolutely clear that moving further away from our East Coast family was not a good plan. So we had, one child and wanted him to be close to his cousins and grandparents and things like that. So, and then, and one day I walked up to my wife's office when we were both working from home and told her, I was like, I don't know what my life story is, but the last line of it cannot be, and then he died in Texas. I was like, I want to go home. I want to go back to New York. And it took a little while. Took a little while to figure it out. But but I was writing this book in Texas, and during COVID, it kind of was. It felt like I was home while I was writing it.
It's kind of a love letter back home, and then kind of made you a little bit longing for home, maybe a little in the process.
I think love letter for back home, and also a love letter for being in your 20s, which is the protagonists are, in their 20s. So I think, sometimes I was like, do I miss home, or do I miss when I was 28 years old at home? But yeah, certainly, I think so.
This isn't your first time writing. You've been writing in different forms and areas in the past. Again, I mentioned your IMDb, and I've been reading up on that. Share a little bit with people, like some of the things you've been working on in the past. And I really want to bring that forward into your author story, because I think that's unique, but a little bit of your background as well.
Sure. So I started off in production, kind of classic old school, start as a PA, work your way up, mopping floors and driving trucks and making coffee. Got on producer track, hooked up with Maisels Films, which were kind of the, great grandparents of the verite cinema movement. made Salesman, Gimme Shelter, a bunch of the films documenting Christo's work. They made, and I just sort of got in that. That kind of became the day job. I was doing production and documentary type stuff, and I was always writing. Um, and then it was hard for me to kind of make that transition from production to writing and directing, even though I was trying to get things going. But very hard to, nobody wants to be the first person to tell you that you're good. So it's too risky. So eventually, I finally got into some screenwriting labs and won some awards, and I could say, "Oh, these people said I'm good," and then I would start to get a little bit of attention. But it wasn't until we moved to Austin until I made my own feature film that I wrote and directed called Two Step, and it was about 20 when I arrived in Austin. It was about 2013, 2012, and it really was like a um let's do a show out in the barn type of vibe a little bit. I mean, but with film production professionals, so
Hmm.
there was
Yeah.
a real like, let's figure out how to make this. And we made it, got into South by, got great reviews, went out, got even better reviews. It was a difficult process, and like most independent film, practically, bankrupted me. But it did start my career. And from there, I got representation, which you need to operate at a professional level in film. And I just kept writing, and then sold my first script in 2016, a script that called Northeast Kingdom that was on the blacklist. So the in film, there's a blacklist online which anyone can submit their work to, and your peers evaluate it and give it a ranking, and studio executives kind of like dig around, look for things. There's another blacklist, which is the same organization, and it's just studio executives, and they are polled at the end of each year as to what were the best scripts they read that year, and they put together a list of like 40 to 50 scripts approximately each year. And so in 2016, I was lucky enough to have one of my scripts on that, and got me a lot of attention. We sold that to Paramount with the intention of me directing. Like a lot of things that happen in film, you once you get to the studio level, you start learning really what a miracle it is that any film gets made. Um, the executives, the president of Paramount was fired literally the day after I signed my contract. Not because of that, but
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
but what happens is previous projects tend to then be looked at with a bit of um, if I make this and it's success, it's going to make the new president look bad. So they generally, it's not, 100%, but they generally just ditch everything from the previous administration and they
Yeah.
start fresh. So you're kind of, you're kind of stuck. So, um, but, and then I just, I do work for hire. I write my own specs. I'm always trying to get, things going, getting things, going with my independent projects in terms of directing. I direct music videos. I mostly do that just to continue to think visually because it's so difficult to direct and to get directing work. But I've some of the projects I've done. I did a adaptation of Ernest Tidyman's novel Big Bucks. Ernest created Shaft and wrote all the Shaft books up to a point. At some point, a ghostwriter took over and he edited them. And then but he was also a famous screenwriter, and he wrote the French Connection screenplay. He wrote, um, I'm blanking on it right now. But anyways, a classic
Yeah.
Western. But he's this great writer that I just love to death, and he really, really an important character, I think, a forgotten character in terms of like trying to get writers to be empowered about their own work, which is very difficult in the film industry and obviously very difficult in publishing as well. To be in control. And that sort of is what inspired me at one point to start thinking about writing a novel. Because
Yeah.
what a lot of people don't realize with screenwriting is that I can have a very very successful career and not have anything get made. There are they each studio buys probably 100 to 200 scripts a year, and they probably make 2 to 5. And there's obviously the independent level. I'm now working at the studio level. So there's the independent thing, but still, those things, a lot of things just don't happen. And so a lot of times you sell a script to enter into a business relationship with the studio. You're hoping to get in some other project or something like that. So, but it gets very frustrating. If you can imagine, you create a world and it disappears. It's not
Yeah.
yours. You literally sold it. And if you have an idea to continue that story, you can't.
Right.
So when it doesn't get made, it can get frustrating. And I was kind of getting frustrated at that point, and I was thinking, well, why not create something and hold on to it, which would be the novel. But at the same time, I've always suffered from incredible imposter syndrome, and with any of my work, and I don't know, I think just like my generation, and just who do I think that I can write a screenplay? Why do I think I'm valid and worthy of working in the film industry? Or, so there's that level. And then there's the who do you think you are writing a novel level of imposter
Yeah.
syndrome, which was pretty severe. And always comes back. But I fought through that. And, then you get one blurb and it's positive and you're like, great. And then you feel like a failure again because you're waiting for the next blurb to come in. But yeah, and so that kind of what led me to write the novel. I wanted I'll get calls from my agents and they'll be like, "Hey, where's your next?" And a spec is a speculative script that you write. You're not getting paid to write it. You write it with the intent of trying to sell it, or maybe just highlighting what you can write, and so you'll get hired for other jobs. And so, like, my agents will be like, "Where's your next spec? We really want to. Your fans really want." And by fans, they mean like junior executives, that are, they're not going to make it. And I was like, I actually do this for people to read and enjoy. That's what drives me, is to tell stories and for people to hear them or to read them. Like that's I don't
Yeah.
want a junior exec. I do want junior executive to like me, but I want people to read my work and I want my stories to have a life, And so that was really all the energy that pushed me towards writing the novel.
I've had some other screenwriters on the show, and the one thing is the mass production of content, that you write it, you submit it, and you start again. You don't even know the results of what you just wrote and who's reviewing what, but you're on to the next project.
Yeah.
So there's like delayed gratification where you just never see the results in real time. They could be years down the road. And
Oh, absolutely.
I'm like, how do you stay creative when you don't get a result for your work?
I do a lot of I did a lot of mentoring. I haven't done it in a little bit, but I did a lot of mentoring in the guild with I'm not going to say younger writers. I'm going to say newer guild members, because people of all ages join the guild. They reach that moment where they join the guild, and I'd say a majority of what I'm there to talk to them about are business questions of things they haven't experienced, and just to put things in context, but then balancing emotional health. It's very hard. You just are faced with rejection so frequently, and the payoff isn't, like you said, it's nowhere near that moment when you write the end and you're feeling so happy and you can't wait for this to go off into the world, and then but you have to keep going. It's hard to keep not just feeling creative but feeling motivated. And that's really the big struggle, I think. In most screenwriters are like me. We're kind of like, I'm not gonna say working class, but like blue collar. Like we're getting paid lower rates and we're doing more, and we're hoping one of them hits, and it can get overwhelming. But I mean, I remember, but that also is coming back to the novel. When I was writing it, there was a point where I was like, at 50 when I wrote it, I was like, oh crap, I think this is what I was supposed to be doing the whole time. I was
Wow.
doing all that
Yeah.
other stuff, and I should have just been doing this. Especially, I should have done it earlier when people bought books.
Right.
So there
Yeah.
we are. but it is, I find it incredibly I found the process, difficult but incredibly satisfying as compared. Well, screenwriting can be incredibly rewarding. It's just you have to just you have to balance. Like, you can't get too excited about good news, and you can't get depressed about bad news.
Yeah.
If that's how you have to live your life. I have projects out there that have been purchased that I'll occasionally get a call from a producer attached and be like, "Hey, blankety blank, just read your script. They love it. They want to make it." And I'm always just like, "You let me know when the first day of set is." Like, I will
Yeah.
smile as I order my breakfast burrito from the craft service truck, and that's when
There you
I'll
go.
allow myself to feel good.
And you'll
But right
celebrate. Yeah.
now, it's all just, I can't, because that also, too much. It's like you have to have ridiculous amounts of hope and positivity, but you kind of can't, I don't know, you have to have some sort of like, you know, blood brain barrier between you can't feel it. You have to have it, but if you feel it, it almost becomes a distraction from doing more work. If you're just too giddy about some project's potential, which I did early in my career, and put all my everything in one basket. This is the one. This is going to hit. And when I should have just been writing, I should have
Right.
just. I can't do anything. Uh, the first studio picture that I sold, I called up the producer one day, uh, who was at Platinum Dunes, which is used to be part of Michael Bay's company, and they did A Quiet Place and all this other stuff. And the producer's just like, yeah, what why are you calling me? And I said, I'm just, hey, what can I do today to get this film a little closer to happening? Which is how on the indie level you live your life. What can we do today to get this project going? Because you have to, even if it's just move an inch, move a foot, whatever. And at the studio level, I asked that question, and the producer said, "You can hang up the phone and stop calling me because you can't do anything." Because it's basically now the gods are fighting over this project, and whoever wins will, that's what will happen. It'll go or it won't. But like, you literally have no input. So it can be frustrating to be out of that much, to not feel in control of your work in that way. And again, which brought me to the novel, to be more in control of my work.
Because you've done both, you're probably one of the best suited to answer this question. The difference between a screenplay writer and an author. What's similar? What's different? Is it the same hat? Different approach? Or is it a completely different path?
Really, to cop out a little bit, it depends on the screenwriter, but
Yeah.
I believe we are living in an era of more literary screenplays. 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case, but you still need to maintain a level of efficiency in terms of how many words you're using. I mean, every script, it's going to be flip to the end, how many pages, and that's going to be the first thing everybody does.
Well,
And so, I mean, I've been described as a literary screenwriter, both as a compliment and as an insult. It matters who's saying it. Um, so, it wasn't too different for me. There are obviously others that are probably more like staccato in terms of like how they write their screenplay. I've never been very good at there are certain people in Hollywood that can, hey, I need a treatment, and they'll do like a beat board, like a beat sheet, just like boom, 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 all the things that are happening. They'll just crank it out, And I'm like, how can you do that if you're not like you don't hear the dialogue? How do you know who these characters are when you haven't put them in a situation yet? You're going to put them in these situations. I don't know. I need that kind of like organic process, and so someone that does that, is good to have a different shift to, I think, novel writing. I mean, the other thing is obvious. The obvious thing is just the amount of time it takes to write a novel,
yeah.
and the patience you need. Screenwriting can go faster. I mean, it goes as fast or slow as you write, but obviously that was a big shift, and it was a big. I think I wrote my first 12 pages in like 2 days, and then I was doing like you know half to a page and a half a day, after that for a good chunk. But I almost did it like I would just set, I would just, it's like being at the gym. I would set like a goal and I'd be like a reasonable goal. If I can make that goal with words, that's a
Yeah.
successful day. And I never made it extreme, because then I would feel beat down. So even if I'm like, I'm just going to do 300 words today, and then I do 2000, whatever it is, it would keep me going. I feel like now that I've done it, um, I can understand the pacing, and not the pacing of the novel, but the pacing of writing a little more. And I wouldn't get as, I'm not going to get as upset with where I am at various points uh, on the next one, just because I understand the process just a little bit better. Um, but you know, the difference for me also is just that this novel is first person.
Mm.
So it allowed me to do something I don't do in the day job,
Right.
which I found fascinating and, honestly, fairly intoxicating to write in the first person.
Yeah.
I'd never done it and really loved it and enjoyed it. And then I think later in the book, at one point, I was kind of like, oh, but then you're also limited by the world that this person sees is all I can really be writing about, and
Yeah.
then I had to adjust to that and figure out ways to kind of like widen the world a little bit. But I think, but my big thing about like what I tell anybody is about can I write a novel, or can I write a screenplay? If you can write, and I say that I'm not trying to overstate what that means. Like if you can express yourself with words. You can do anything involved with writing. Like if you write a clear essay, if you are great at writing emails, you just have to understand that the process takes time. And
Hmm.
you can't really beat yourself up for how long it takes. I mean, lawyers, the amount of writing lawyers do. I mean,
Yeah.
and they're like, well, it's different. It's not the same. I'm like, nah, it's words. I mean, you can do it. I think we always build these barriers between us to prevent us from doing other things that other people have done. I'm a big advocate of that. One thing I do in terms of how I write, I'm basically going back to I've been doing the same thing since sophomore year of high school, which helps me have all the fuel that I need to propel me through a story. Is I just do this spillage page that Mr. Cannon, sophomore year, Gonzaga College High School, Washington D.C.,
Yeah.
taught us. And so what we used to have to do for his class, we would write a 1 page essay. The first page was the spillage page. It was just ideas. The second page was the rough draft, and the third page was the final product. And it was kind of like almost like that third page wasn't as important as the process of getting to that third page.
Mm.
And so the rule with the spillage, and I know other people do this, so it's not revolutionary, but for those that don't know, the rule is just you create a document that you cannot erase anything in. You know, it's just your document. You have to really just be okay with embarrassing yourself. Nothing can get erased. If you type, it stays in it. And I'll do that with all my projects. I've switched to like sticky notes now because it's sunk between my phone and my laptop. So if I'm in bed or I'm on the subway, and I'll have all my different projects that I'm developing. They can be professional things, they can be personal things. And if just something comes to me or dialogue, I type it in. And I want that to get to a nice meaty length,
Yeah.
30 pages or so. So I feel like I have the fuel that'll push me into the second act, which is where in screenplays at least, where so many of the stories start falling apart. I always describe it as like there's a moment in screenwriting sometimes where you're driving this car and it's like it's cruising, and then like things start vibrating.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then like the hubcaps come off, and then the doors fall off, and that typically in screenwriting happens in the second act a lot. You might know where you're going to end, and how you're starting, but you're having trouble getting through that. So generally, when I have this rich document, I have enough material to get me past that. And even if I don't use it, it gives me the confidence to believe that I can do it because I've
Hmm.
got all this stuff. And a lot of that stuff will spark the better ideas. You know, a lot of the dumb stuff sparks the better ideas. So, yeah.
The one thing I would be curious about then, again, going back to screenwriting versus writing your novel, is the visuals, because as a writer, as an author, you don't have a visual component to what you're doing. So you got theater of the mind,
Mhm.
you got to do some more explanation. When you're on screen, you have a blue car. You don't have to say it's a blue car. I can see it's a blue car and it's driving down the road towards the desert sunset, right? I can see it without you telling me a word. But in a book, if you don't tell me, I don't know what's happening. So the visual components of the two, how do they differ for you?
You just get to use more words, but you
Yeah.
have to make it visceral in a
Yeah.
screenplay. Like you have to make it feel real. And I go back to Ernest Tidyman. You know, his goal was always like he believed every screenplay. The head of every department should pick the script up, read it. The wardrobe person should be like, "Oh my God, I can't wait to dress these people." The cinematographer should just be like the visuals, you know, the everybody should get excited about it. And to do that, you need to set the tone. It's difficult to balance that. You know, you need to get efficient. You need to find a way. My first drafts are always wordier than they're going to be in terms of screenwriting, and you know, and there's also this phrase, the white on the page, right? You know, like people get, you know, intimidated by these big chunks of text on the page, especially in screenwriting. But one of the keys in screenwriting is both like still creating a visceral sensory experience while being efficient with words, but also setting the tone at setting the pace that I want you to read the screenplay at. Like
Mm.
setting the rhythm, and that is done with the white on the page. You know, that is done with the em dash, that is done with ellipses, that is done like one of the best. Anyone that's trying to get into screenwriting and is trying to balance it, I highly recommend you read Alex Garland's later screenplays. So Alex Garland did Annihilation. He just did, you know, he used to be, he was the screenwriter of like 28, all the 28 Days Later series, and he did 28
Yeah.
Years Later with Danny Boyle. They were partners. He wrote Sunshine. But I would say from like Annihilation and Ex Machina are two just I don't know. I think they're really perfect in terms of like making you read it at a pace like you're not control. You're reading it and you think you're reading it at your pace, but you're reading it at his
Yeah.
pace, and it's because of how he wrote it and how he moves things, and he has this incredibly efficient way of being descriptive. It wasn't so much in his earlier scripts. Like everybody, we all get better, and now
Yeah.
I think he's really working at a triple A level. Just any writer should read those and try to get a sense of how they do that. And I also always tell people that are trying to get into this is we were talking earlier about audiobooks and listening to an audiobook while you're reading the book because I'm just
Mhm.
finishing the audiobook. I always tell writers that are trying to crack the mystery of how a screenplay is written or whatever. Get download a screen. You know, millions of screenplays are accessible to you. Film name, script, PDF, search. You'll generally find it. And then have it open, laptop open while you watch the movie and read.
Oh,
Read while you're watching the movie.
wow.
And if you see consistencies, hit pause, look where you are in the script. You're going to find that the big, huge moment invariably is going to happen between pages 29 and pages 33. Every screen.
Wow.
And so you just start to figure the pacing out. And it's like everyone always says, they want you to be new and exciting, but still, still kind of like not totally breaking the mold type of thing. And so
Yeah.
so you do need to hit certain beats in a script that people are expecting, that the industry is expecting. So just look for that and be like, oh, we're in the last third of the movie, and things are getting better, and then there's the this moment. Some call it the all is lost moment. I mean, again, it's not cookie cutter. I'm not a fan of Save the Cat. I'm not a fan of any of that stuff personally. But if it gets you to write a script, or it motivates you to do it, whatever you want to do, that's great. Everybody has their own method. Unfortunately, my method is like painfully organic and involves a lot of rewriting.
Yeah.
A lot of forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, which is difficult for the studio system. But I do what I can. But anyways, definitely do that. Read scripts and watch films, and it'll take the mystery out a little bit of terms of like, when you look at, they have these charts and it's just like act one, and inciting incident and this and that and all is lost moment, and you're kind of like, what are these things? But if you're watching a movie with a script, and it starts to kind of like, the veil gets lifted a little bit. It'll take a few to get it, I always recommend that.
It's a very interesting exercise. I've never thought of doing that. Now I want to go right now. I got to finish the interview with you, but after this, I'm going to go look at that.
Go.
That's a great idea. It's excellent. Let's take everybody back home, back to Brooklyn. Tell us more about the book for the readers here listening. I want them to connect with you and fall in love with the book, the audiobook. But take us to the book. What it's about. Give us a little overview of the story.
Sure. So Brooklyn Motto, I've always wanted, again, linking everything back to Ernest Tidyman, I've always wanted to create my own detective character. I'm a Columbo freak. I love Shaft. And I wanted a detective character that I could sort of identify with. So the story, I'll tell the story real quick, is just a reluctant private investigator. He works for a lawyer that gets hired by the city whenever a city worker has an insurance claim over a certain amount, and that just triggers a little surveillance to make sure the person isn't faking. So if it's a back injury, and he's putting his daughter on his shoulders, or he's jumping on a trampoline, then he takes some pictures. And so he kind of hates his job, and he kind of stumbled into it through temping, and eventually got a license. But he sort of is that way you are in your 20s in some ways, about like, why am I doing this? He's following a police officer, and while he's videotaping the police officer's house, two other police officers enter and kill that police officer and his wife. And so he takes the tape to his boss, who then takes it to someone else, which results in basically bodies starting to pile up. And he has to kind of make that decision. He has to start acting. He has to start being kinetic. You know what I mean? So it's like he has to decide, am I going to let this go, or am I going to investigate? And he investigates, and it sort of awakens a calling for him in terms of investigating. And so it takes place in 1998 in New York City during the Giuliani era, which was a tense time for many people, especially people of color in New York City. It's also, it's about that. It's got this noir murder mystery going on, but it's also about being 28, 29. It's about that moment in your life where you have to start acting instead of reacting to things, and you have to start being like, oh, I need to move forward. I need to make decisions. I think so many of us feel like we're going to get a second shot at all this, and then we realize we're not at life, when we're older. So it's there. It's funny. It's dark. It's it's also a bit of an investigation of self to me. I had never really made characters that were really deeply connected to kind of like or resembled me. But as I get older, I'm, I want to know more about myself, and the people that can answer those questions are passing or have passed. The book kind of became sort of an investigation of self in some way. My mother's was Ecuadorian. My father is Irish American. And when you are mixed and typically not looking like you're Latin, or I'll get Jewish or Italian, but a lot of times I am witness to, pretty horrific, overt displays or discussion of racism. I mean, just like people saying things because they think I'm
Yeah.
white like them.
Yeah.
But it can also lead to, kind of a blurry sense of self, which I think overlaps with that 28-year-old period of your life. In terms of like you're not white enough for the white side, you're not brown enough for the brown side. And just what that means to somebody who is individuating. So I leaned into that in a lot of ways as well. Um, but it's fun. I think it's a fun read, and uh, uh, really, it was also a fun to write, to live back then. If I'm going to investigate myself, why not go back to the period where I was felt mildly invincible, um,
Mm.
before
Yeah.
I turned 30. Um, but it's also set there because I have an arc in terms of like where I want to take the character next. Um, in terms of like 2000 and then 2003. So I needed to set it kind of in that 98 period.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
What percentage of the book was written in Austin?
all of it.
All of it. Okay.
All
None
of
of it saved for when you got back to Brooklyn.
Yeah, all of it. And then when we got back to Brooklyn is when I started the process of, a lot of rewriting happened still in Brooklyn, a lot of tweaking and
Yeah.
things like that. But yeah, but so I had this. When I was trying to decide I wanted to set in 98, it was difficult because I was, I am, as they say, of a certain age. And my that's basically the limit of how far I can remember.
Yeah.
But I found my there used to be this thing called the Manhattan Diary, which was you could find it at like bookstores had it by the cash register, and it was just a very rectangular date book, and I was in film production, so I was freelance, so I would get booked, and I'd be put on hold, and I had to block out time, and I couldn't I didn't want to double book, and I needed to know stuff. So I had that maybe earlier than a lot of people were like keeping those things, and then I also had like movies, and so I found it recently, or I found it when I was writing the book, and just flipping through it, seeing like 1998 New York City movies at Film Forum that I went to go see, Bell and Sebastian concerts,
Mm.
whatever,
Yeah.
different bands and things like that. Dates that maybe weren't dates, but I was hoping were dates, or actual dates, and
Mm.
names I hadn't seen in a million years,
Yeah.
and so that really brought everything back. But then also I went ahead and ordered some Village Voices on eBay from the period of the book, the exact kind of like month of 1998, November 1998, late October 1998 is when I
Mm.
wanted to have the book set. I had the book set, and just flipping through these Village Voices, and for the people that don't know, the Village Voice is just one of them is an independent weekly, was one of the most famous independent weeklies in the United States. But there's independent weeklies all over, or there were, unfortunately, not so many anymore.
Yeah.
But just the muscle memory, just again, like you see like the
Yeah.
same ad and just like, oh my gosh. And then of course it's the 90s, so there's like 10,000 ads for futons. Um, you know, and but you can look at film listings like, oh yeah, I went to that movie, and I remember I took a date to see Happiness, and she hated it, and I loved it. We got on the fight, and all that stuff, and so that kind of like brought the world back in a big way. It helped, and then I had plenty of friends that were willing to police my authenticity of the era.
Hmm.
That's many notes from people were like, "That's not actually how much the CDs outside of Accidental Records cost." You said they cost this much. They cost this much. I'm just like, oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah. I got all my CDs from Columbia House anyway, so I paid a penny. So I'm good.
Right, changing, having it mailed to your neighbor's place or whatever, and grabbing it out of the lobby.
Never happened. We're recording right now. Never happened. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
What about like just walking the streets and resetting yourself from Austin back to Brooklyn? Was there times where you kind of walk through the story as well when you're doing the rewrites and working through?
Yes. Yeah, I did, and and I'm not. I also from Austin. I did. I just searched an incredible amount. I mean, I was also just like looking for photos of things. There are certain places I wish I wanted to put in the book that I couldn't because I couldn't find a photo reference or something, and I knew that if I messed up the description of Planet Thai in Williamsburg in 1997, that I would hear it from people,
Yeah, yeah.
or pull somebody out of the story. But then I did, when I came back, one of the first bars I went to visit a friend at when we moved back to the city was 7B, which is a big part of the book. It's one of the things in the book is that the character's father is dead, and he was a musician and a heroin addict, and he OD'd uh, uh, when the character was about 22. But he has all these visceral memories of going to the movies with his father, and you know, um, New York City is this kind of like town of cinephiles.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of it is because, and other cities are, and forgive me, I'm not dismissing other cities, but I just speak from New York City's perspective, is that it's a town that it's really easy to be overwhelmed with loneliness in. And, one of the ways you have to cope is learning how to get something out of being alone in a group and going to the movies and sitting at a diner, reading, whatever. You're getting you're feeding your soul in some ways with community, even though you might not be communicating.
Yeah.
So I feel like cinema is such a big part of New York that I made this thing where he and his father had a troubled relationship, but that he took him to a lot of revival cinema, and so a lot of the book has film references in it. When he sees visuals that remind him of a movie, like he might make a reference to it. But one of the important things is this bar 7B, which I loved and I lived at in a good chunk of the 90s. But it's famous because it is probably one of the most filmed bars in New York City. Currently, Marvel loves it. Jessica Jones was there, and all these, not Deadpool, Daredevil, and
Yeah.
all these people. But back in the day, it's where Paul Newman playing pinball at the beginning of the Verdict,
Yeah.
in where he drinks. It's where Serpico met with the cops to discuss like potentially what he's going to do. What met with like the lawyers and stuff to try to come out. It's in gosh, it's in just a million movies, and so I wanted to have it, in the book. It's all over Russian Doll, Natasha Lyonne's show. Like
Oh,
everything happens around that bar, like kind of like outside of it or inside of it, and so it was really important to me. So I thought it was a really good bar to have him be a regular at, with the idea being that it's familiar because you've already seen it in so many things, and
mm,
when you're looking for things in a city of and that can make you really lonely. You're looking for things that feel comfortable and safe, and because of seeing films with his father, it felt safe. But so I went back there, which when I was a single in the 90s, I would go there and just get a couple of pints and play pinball. And I knew that at some point in the evening, somebody I knew would walk in. So I used to play pinball there all the time. But I went back with a friend, and all the pinball machines were gone, which
mm,
was painful. And there were 1,000 TVs up because
yeah.
they become some sort of a sports bar. And that's part of the story too, is that the city changes, and everybody has their city. Every place I went, when I walked the city streets and everything like that, everything, some things are the same, but most things are different. And you know every generation has that in New York about you're mad because the Thai place is gone, and then it became a deli, and then it became a bank.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's typically where it all ends up, is a bank or a
Yeah.
drugstore.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody has the things that make them mad about what changes in the city. But the city is just going to change with or without you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of it has changed, but I did walk through it a bunch.
Nice. So, Alex, for the reader, what is your love letter for the book? We kind of talked about the story, the characters, but if you could kind of share with the readers, what is your hope as a reader as they grab a copy of Brooklyn Motto?
I want you to be, when you finish the book, I want you to be sad that you're finished reading it, but happy because it feels like a story beginning for the protagonist, for the character. I really tried to put hope at the end of the book, and positivity. It's a dark noir, but life is a dark noir sometimes, and you still need, and to tie it back into how to exist in a career with constant rejection, you need hope. To see through kind of like the darkness of the story and see that it's also about a story beginning, which is really what our 20s were about. It's our story's beginning. And that's what I'm doing with the book.
Excellent. So the website is brooklynmotto.com. We'll have a link for that in the show notes for everybody. I'm encouraging everybody, when you buy a copy, not if, but when, they leave a great review. I know Alex would love to hear your thoughts. But you see it from a reader's perspective. I think that would really be meaningful to him as an author. You talk about the story being a starting point. What about for you as an author, Alex? My show is called Living the Next Chapter. It's kind of in the name.
Yeah.
How are you living your next chapter?
I'm gonna try to take. I'm trying to take control of the stories and the screenplays that didn't connect or that weren't able to go. And now that I feel like I understand the concept of writing a novel, a few of my projects I'm gonna adapt into novel form, with the understanding that whatever happens, but at least I'm going to tell that story and people are going to read it. That's what matters to me, and I'm looking forward to trying to write start the next book in the series of Nico Kelly.
Nice. Excellent. Alex, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for writing the book and spending time with us. We've learned a lot. Again, I'm going to go watch a movie with a screenplay in front of me and watch it and go, wow, this is blowing my mind. So it's a great suggestion. But Alex, thank you so much for being part of the show. I'm going to send lots of people to you to come read and support you. So again, thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Everybody, as always, show notes. You'll see all the links. Grab a copy of the book. I love it. It's yellow. It's kind of like a taxi cab yellow almost. And that kind of brings me back to New York as well. So Alex, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Dave.
Hey, thank you so much again for pressing play. As you've heard, great guests on the show. And one thing you didn't hear in this conversation is what? What did you not hear? Think about it for a second. That's right. Not a single solitary commercial for a mattress or a supplement or a whatever you call it. No. Why? Because we don't want to break up the conversation with commercials. So the fact that you're still here means that you are a fan of the show, I'm assuming. So if you want to help to keep the podcast going and to make me feel really happy, all I really care about is coffee, okay? I just got to be honest. I love coffee. I'm drinking one right now. It's starting to get cold. I need to warm it up. Helping us with our Buy Me a Coffee link over at livingthenextchapter.com and also in the show notes helps kind of keep the lights on around here. Remember, I'm doing this for free. I'm paying for everything. So I would love to have a little coffee donation, even $5 kind of fills up my cup. And I would love to enjoy a coffee from you. So if you're interested, again, thank you for listening. But you can use our Buy Me a Coffee link and fill up the cup. Thanks for being here.